Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Wednesday, about 6:30 a.m. A little overcast out, some light sprinkles, unlike sprinkles on a cupcake, which a cupcake sounds delicious. And I am a little groggy. The cold, you know how the back half of the cold where you're still like congested, but you like feel a little better. I don't know. I feel like my brain is running at 80% capacity right now. So I'll do my best here. But yeah, things are good. It's patch day. Patch day. And you know what that means? I did that thing where I wake up and I look at all the data. And good news is it looks pretty solid. What I'll say is it seems like the nerfs to the top stuff did its job. Like 7 Exotech still looks playable, but not quite as good as it was before. 6 Vanguard looks a bit worse, which again just shows you the margins we're dealing on. If 48%'s busted and 45%'s fine. Yeah, the top, I think if you're one of those people that likes to overreact to data, it looks like the MF buffs look quote unquote incorrect. 4 Dynamo looking really strong again. But I mean, the data on it looks fine. Something has to be the strongest, and Dynamo Flex being the strongest will probably make for a very interesting world. So, seems okay. If I had one criticism to the patch so far, looks like the Nitro buffs weren't enough. Part of that could just be people not knowing when to play Nitro and things like that, but the Nitro buffs don't seem to have moved the needle that much. Amp looks significantly worse. So, yeah. We'll see. I'm going to try to sneak some games in today when I can. I've got some other work to do. I got to grade some stuff and do some other stuff. But it looks like on my calendar there will be time in between to get some games in. So, yesterday I also managed to get all the pictures ready for the Set 15 PBE rundown, got that all done. And yeah, 2 more days, kind of just winding down here, keeping an eye on things. I did some play tests with the team yesterday on 15 and 16, so that was pretty cool. So yeah. Okay, let's do questions. Sorry, my mind's at like slightly less capacity than normal. I was also reading the Reddit this morning, and I don't know, man. I wish competitive players could just like be. I don't know. I'm gonna sound like a boomer here, but it's like with the mango situation and the soju situation. It's just like these kids that grew up playing video games and doing nothing but playing video games. It's tough, man. You guys gotta be respectful adults and follow the rules, but I don't know, man. Like I said, I'm just a boomer. Thankfully, I'm not actually a boomer, but I am getting old. So, anyway, okay. The first question is a really interesting one. It's a spicy one, and it says, "Hey, what's the deal with the visual aids and consistency between all the different augments and traits and things like that? Right? Why do some things like Quicksilver has a barrier, and Hodge has this like red and yellow effect that switches between, and other things have nothing? Like, what's the deal with the visual consistency between all the different effects, right? Some augments that probably should have an effect, like say big buddies. Why doesn't it have an effect? Things like that. What's the deal? Who makes them? How does that work? All that jazz. So, realistically, this is one of those things that in a perfect world, if everything was perfect, which it isn't, there would be some overall hierarchy framework that says, if your augment is providing a buff to one unit, it should look like this. If your augment is providing a buff or has a requirement, it looks like this, right? And there'd be like this really consistent, natural visual language between all the different outputs. Kind of like the augments that have gold counters, right? It's like there would be just a nice clean rule that says item effects give this type of visual and things like that. But that's not really how TFT was built. And so that's never happened. And we haven't quite had the rules lawyer designer to really approach that kind of thing and make it consistent. Instead, what ends up happening is some designer is in charge of making an item, and they make what is best for that item because that is the project they're on, or they make that augment and they make what they think is needed for that augment, and they do that in isolation, and they don't take into account the consistency between things, because that requires a pretty deep amount of knowledge and consistency. And so really what I'm saying is we just haven't, we're not there yet. And will we ever be? Maybe. In a perfect world, sure. But yeah, there are a ton of augments where it's like you can kind of see who made the augment and the consistency they thought it through and things like that. So again, higher level here, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Stuff like little buddies, for example, should probably have, imagine if little buddies had a little floating star around the 4 and 5 costs, and there was a floating star for each, like an orbiting star for each 1 and 2 cost you had. And so you got this clear visual feedback of, oh, I have 3 stacks of little buddies on my champions, and these are the 3 champions receiving that little buddies buff, right? Like, that would be a really good thing to add to little buddies. But the only way that gets added post-launch is if someone like a live designer or an augment designer goes back and improves that. And to do that, they either have to hobble together an existing visual effects from something else that they could grab, or they have to ask the artist to make them something new and bespoke, which means you're pulling time away from the artists on any newer stuff that they're supposed to be working on. And so, using Little Buddies as a prime example, that augment's been around for a few sets now. It's been fine. So saying, hey, I really need to make this visual effect so that Little Buddies is clearer is a pretty hard sell when it comes to production, priorities. So, but should Little Buddies have that? Yeah, probably. If the person who originally made Little Buddies was like the perfect designer and had thought that through, yeah, probably. But here's the other trick too. Let's say you have Little Buddies, and then you have another augment that gives a visual effect, and an item, and you put like a dragon claw on that same champion. It's like, how many visual effects do you need, right? Like, and this is another part of, this is what Riot at least calls UX, because it is, but really game design should be thinking about this regardless, is what is the visual hierarchy importance of the buffs, right? So is it important that Dragonclaw has a shield, or is it important that Little Buddies has these orbiting stars? Do they both need to be there? Is it too noisy if they're both there? What about in combat? If I stun them, does that need a visual effect, right? Like if you have too many visual effects going on at once, it just looks like a cluster of everything. And that's not great. So, and this is where, again, like a really, really good UX designer would create a hierarchy. So an example here might be anything item dependent is considered extremely important for readability during combat. And so those stay on the whole game. Whereas anything from an augment is important for team setup, but not during combat. So, the Little Buddies orbiting stars could go away at the start of combat, so that you lose visual clutter, But on the transition phase, you're like, oh, that Zaya has 4 little buddies worth of stuff. Okay, watch out. And then she fights, So, I would call this one of those projects that, like, again, with infinite time and infinite resources, should we make better? Yeah. But the delta between where we are now and what that perfect world looks like is a slight improvement, but it's also not the kind of improvement that, like, really makes players just have a lot more fun or moves the needle that much, right? Again, I'm going to keep using this Little Buddies example, but it's like Little Buddies has functioned fine. Would those stars be nice? Yeah, sure. And that's why a lot of the times your decision making around what you work on has to be the impact to the player relative to the time cost of what you else could be doing, right? If I have a designer who is working on these augments, do I want him doing a pass on the consistency of the visual language? Or do I want him using that time to make 10 new augments for the next set? Right? And I think there, the choice is pretty clear. Like 10 new augments to the next set would be a lot more impactful to a lot of players. So, and it's one of those really scary things too, because I think a lot of developers and humans, frankly, struggle with this, right? Is like the perfect execution here is better for sure, but the 95% execution that can be done in half the time is probably just as good. If you're trying to ship a game, doing the 95% solution can get you 99% of the value. Like, sometimes you got to make that call. And I see a lot of projects, spend way too much time trying to get everything perfect, but the impact is pretty minor. So, anyway, I did like this question because even upon thinking about the answer, it's sort of like, yeah, I can easily see a bunch of things that we need to make better here. It's just a question of when. And so realistically, what I would do is I would coach the current augment designers and just be like, guys, don't forget, try to come up with some visual consistency hierarchy as you make these so that things are clear. So, yeah. And it's also one of those things that, like, if you're a turbo nerd and you really, really enjoy the game, it sort of shatters the illusion of like, wait, the designers didn't get it perfect? Because I'm kind of giving a nonchalant answer here, right? Which is like, yeah, you're right. It should be better, but it's not going to be, which is kind of rough if you like break it down like that. But again, it's about efficiency. It's about making sure that the value of that work really makes the product that much better. So there you go. All right. Will you stream other games besides TFT? So this is a hard one. I don't know if I'm actually a very entertaining variety streamer. Don't get me wrong, I like playing other games. I also tend to be pretty overly critical when I play other games. And I'm not sure being overly critical, is that entertaining? Watching me learn on the spot. Now, I've done a few variety streams. I think there's been 2 types. One is playing a game I'm already comfortable with, right? Like the Chrono Trigger stream. Those I think are actually really fun. I think those are entertaining. Or for some of you OG people, I don't know how many of you even remember this, but when I did the Mega Man stream, I played through like a bunch of Mega Mans. I think those are fun. I think when I'm already comfortable with a game, I'm just kind of having fun. I think those are okay. But like the Elden Ring stream, or whatever that game I recently played was, that strategy one, or the Blueprints one. Oh, I think Blue Velvet was dying watching the Blueprints one. It's like, am I really that entertaining to watch? I'm not sure. So, and don't get me wrong, I don't care about this because I'm not doing streaming for money or anything. But there's the mathematical part of my brain that looks at streaming as a hobby, and you want to be as successful as you can. And something that you learn is that, like, multi-streaming or whatever, variety streaming, actually can hit your viewership pretty hard. Not a lot of people successfully make the transition to variety streaming. And if you watch some of the big streamers from 5 years ago and look at them now that they're variety streamers, their viewership can be as low as 90% lower, which is interesting. So there's a part of me that's sort of like, well, no, but I've started up the streaming thing and I'm a TFT streamer. Now I do have the alt channel for this, and that's been okay. So I don't know if the other thing, one of the other really annoying things is my current PC setup does not have a great way to stream console games. So right now, at least, I'm limited to PC, and some PC games can't handle my monitor. You know, the super extra wide monitor I have. For example, Expedition 33, I could not get the settings to display on my big monitor, but as a normal ratioed game. It refused to do it. It was like, we're going to make you play on turbo widescreen, which was nauseating. It was actually nauseating. Or you have to switch monitors. My stream setup's not able to do that either. So it was like kind of a pain, because I actually did want to stream Expedition 33. I just couldn't get it set up to do it. Or, like, to be honest, one of the games I'd really love to stream coming up would be Donkey Kong Bonanza. I'm actually really looking forward to that game. But, like I said, I'm just not set up to do it right now. Because currently I have one of those capture cards, but that's how I actually use my camera right now. And I don't have it set up to do the output to the monitor, so I can actually, like, play the game. So I would need to figure that out. Now, hilariously enough, one of the other things I've been told I should stream is actually pack openings. I've got a bunch more Final Fantasy Magic cards coming. Someone was like, you should stream the pack opening. I'm like, well, there's something a little uncomfortable about, look at all these packs I was able to afford to buy because I'm old and have finally saved up some money. But it feels a little, I don't know, weird. So, I don't know. The TLDR here is, will I stream other games? I would say 80% chance of no, but 20% chance of yes, because I'm definitely interested. And if I find there's other games on, Monster Train 2 is another game I need to play at some point. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Also, I think part of this will depend on the set 15 meta. If the set 15 meta is really, really good, I'll probably keep playing TFT. If it's really, really bad and I can't do anything to fix it because I'm not on the team, I don't want to sit there and stream and be negative on the game. So I might stream something else, or not stream. Because I really, 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 really need to avoid streaming TFT when I'm not on the team and saying anything bad about the game. Like, that would be like mission fail, Mort's a giant douchebag. So I need to not do that. It's very important to me to not do that. So yeah. There you go. All right. Next one. How do you handle letting go and letting the team handle it? Okay. So I'm going to give kind of an unconventional answer for this one. And if it gets me in trouble, I'm sorry. But again, I always have to tell the truth. I don't like lying. How do you handle letting go? I don't like it. I actually really, really don't like it. I really don't like how business is set up, where once you become good at something, your job is to stop doing that thing and move up the corporate ladder, or let somebody else do it, or, I for better or worse, and maybe it's because my dad's been a mechanic for so long in his own business, and he just fixes cars, and he has for 45 years. It's like, I want to be, the example I've always used when talking with my boss is, I want to be the master blacksmith, right? Like, you come to me and I make the best swords in the world. And yeah, I can teach other people how to make swords. But at the end of the day, I make the best swords. And I find it very weird when you have somebody on your company payroll who can make the best swords, and you say, yeah, but we don't want you to make swords. Like, that's just so weird to me. I actually do not get the incentive of a company to say, hey, we know you're good at making swords, so stop it, teach other people, or go do something else. Like, it's so weird to me. And so it's a weird part of my career right now where everyone above me is telling me stop working on the game, and I'm going, I don't think that's correct. You know, before we hired Peter as game director, they said, Mort, we kind of want you to be game director. Or I should rephrase that. They didn't say we want you to be game director. They said, if you want to be game director, we'd work with you to make that happen. And I said, I don't think that's the right call for TFT. Having me not work on the game will make TFT a worse game. It'll be better for my career, but it'll make TFT a worse game. You should find somebody who's going to be better at that role, which is a lot more like team organization, communicating with CEOs, longer term plans, things like that. And so they hired Peter, who is way better at that role. Peter is better at that game director role than I'd ever be. But it's weird. And so how do we handle letting go? I don't. I'll be honest. There are days where it's like, you know, they're making decisions I wouldn't make, or they're not seeing some of the things I'm seeing, you know. And here's the thing, like, so you go back to the sword analogy, and I'll pick on Kent because I love Kent. You know, if Kent's swords are 98% as good as mine, it's probably fine, you know. It's not a problem, and maybe I should just let Kent make these 98% as good swords. But there's still a part of me that's like, that 2%. You know, it could be even better, or we could build the swords faster, or whatever. So, I don't know. Now, that being said, some days you just have to, right? Like, in this particular case, because I've been asked to go solve these other problems, it's not like I have a choice, you know? But it's weird. I don't know. And I've had many people tell me I'm wrong. That's just how it is. That's just how business works. Or, Mort, you're being selfish because you're just making games. Do you want to just sit there and balance TFT for the rest of your life? And it's like, well, no. I want to make swords. I'm really going with this analogy, by the way. But, yeah, it is what it is. So, I don't know. I handle it by just moving forward and going, well, at the end of the day, this is what I've been asked to do. Sir, yes, sir. I do what I do. But, I don't know. It's definitely weird to me. So, we'll see how it all plays out, though. We'll see. There's something, I don't know. There's something about, I take pride in the fact that I make good swords. And I want to keep making swords. I take pride in my work. So, all right. Are you excited for Riftbound? So, yes and no. And this is nothing against Riftbound. This is more my own personal issues. So I am excited for Riftbound in the sense that, like, hey, getting in on the ground CCG sounds fun. Collecting the cards for champions that I have pretty high affinity for seems pretty cool. The game I played there seems pretty fun. Maybe a little rules heavy, but like overall, pretty fun. We played a 4-player game at Macau, and it was like, yep, this could work. And obviously it was like our first game, so we need to learn more. So in that regard, yes. Collecting stuff seems fun, you know. We'll see how many variations and stuff, but I like buying cards and putting them in sleeves and organizing them. So that's all very entertaining and relaxing. The reason I would say no, and again, this is nothing against Riftbound, is just that I don't have a lot of people to play with. Between work and family, there isn't a lot of other time. Like I said, I've been collecting Magic for a few months now since I got back into it. I just haven't really had time to play that many games. I think I've really only played Magic 2 or 3 times since I got back into it. So while I'm excited, it's like, what are the odds I'm actually going to have 4 people who all play Riftbound to get together and play Riftbound? Pretty unlikely. So for me personally, it's like, if it happens, cool. Or I'm sure I'll play with some riders when I'm there at some point. But like, that's not jumping off the page to me. Now, if I were somebody who was 18 and had a group of friends in college who were all CCG players, I'd be a lot more excited. Right? And again, that's what I'm saying. This has nothing to do, this is no shade to Riftbound. This is just in my personal world right now. I don't know that any CCG would like super duper excite me. So that's, as far as the game itself goes, or the cards though, those look great. I got no qualms with that. So, gotta get me, I don't even know if this is a real card, by the way, so this isn't some weird spoiler or anything like that. I'm just saying I like Teemo, and so if there's a Teemo deck where I can make Teemos and make shrooms and stuff like that, hell yeah, I'm doing that. That sounds fun. And again, that's not a real spoiler. That's just me saying I like League of Legends. So nobody misinterpret this as some... I don't have insider knowledge on Riftbound. That team works completely separate. It's always funny. Ever since the Yone incident, I have to be really careful with that. For those who don't know, the Yone incident was somebody was asking me in an interview when we were going to delete Yasuo before Yone came out, and I made a snide joke with no understanding whatsoever. I just was like, oh, not only are we not deleting Yasuo, but we're going to make a second Yasuo. And then the Champions team came at me and were like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And they're like, we're making Yone. I was like, oh, oops. You know, so I like accidentally leaked something without even knowing that I was leaking something. And thankfully it was a small interview and no one cared anyway, but yeah. So ever since then I have to be really careful where it's like I just make silly jokes and then, but wait, that silly joke is like half true and you didn't even know it was half true. So like what I don't need is if Teemo is some real card that the Riftbound team is like, what are you doing? Teemo was part of set 7. Blah, blah, blah. Guys, I don't know anything. It's too funny. Okay, I got one more question written down here. Bad scaling champions, is this intended? So the answer is no, but it's less about the champions. And I would ask the person who asked this question. So the person was asking like, hey, there are certain champions in the game that are really, really good in the early game, but come late game, they're terrible. Right? And the examples they used were like Alistar, Graves, things like that. I think Alistar and Graves are 2 really good examples from this set. So, is it intentional that they're like bad scalers? Not really. We don't, when we're making champions, no one's like, hey, we want to make a champion that's only good in the early game. No, that's not a thing. But there are certain properties and certain things that are true about TFT right now that make these things true. For example, I'll give you a really good example here. Flat health. If I made a 2-piece trait, and that 2-piece trait said your team gains 300 health, when is that trait really good? Stage 2. Stage 2 and 3, right? Now, come to the late game, stage 4 and stage 5, if you can splash in this trait, is that good? Not really. 200 flat health in the late game doesn't really move the needle much. Likewise, this is why, for example, 5 Syndicate or Exotech kind of struggled a little bit. Now, last patch, Exotech didn't struggle because eventually there's a number where it's just good all game. But, you know, flat health is one of those stats that has a property in our game where it's really, really good early. Because taking your 1-star unit from 600 health to 800 health, that's a big increase. Taking your 2-star Warmog's 4,000 health unit to 4,200 health, not really that good. So Alistar, flat damage reduction. Turns out flat damage reduction, when you've got a bunch of really slow attack speed 1-star units hitting you for 50, and you're reducing 30 of it, pretty good. Now, when those same champions have 3 items on them, and their autos are hitting you for 400, and you're reducing it to 380, not that good. So there are just certain properties that if we choose to design around, this will just be a natural truth. Another example of this is melee champions. Melee champions inherently are at risk. Okay, that is a big truck. I'm going to get out of the road here. I don't want to get run over by the giant truck. Okay. Melee champions are always at risk, right? When, they can get targeted and die pretty quick. When there's only 4 or 5 champions on the board, it's really hard to kill a 2-item Graves. But when you're level 8 and have 4 marksmen, you can burst down a melee champion pretty quick. Assuming they're balanced, like melee champions inherently are just really, really good early. And, here's a spoiler for those of you that are watching this. Next set, it's going to be even more like melee champions will always be better early because people's inability to burst them down when they don't really have early game boards. But late game, due to the way targeting works, that's just a property of melee champions in TFT. So, and without making some sort of abstract rule where you're like, melee champions scale defenses as the game goes on, which is weird. But all you have to do is look at summon traits for this to notice this is true. So, yeah, it's definitely not intentional, but it's just a natural property of what TFT is and how we understand how TFT fights go down. So, yeah. All right, we're at 32 minutes. I could probably talk more about that topic, but I got to wrap this up quick. One other interesting thing today is finally the vet appointment for Sephiroth, who's been in our garage for a couple weeks now. Poor little kitty's so lonely. He loves his food. Holy cow. So hopefully the vet appointment goes well. It's in a couple hours. My wife's taking him in. And if it does, I can get him cleaned up. And then hopefully maybe actually bring him in the house, meet the other cats, make some progress. That'll be good. And yeah, all right, I'm going to go prep, get some work done, play some games on this patch. Hopefully don't crash out all my LP. And yeah. All right, I will see you guys in 2 days for stream on Friday. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Have a good rest of your week. Until next time, take it easy.